Let me show you how to make this sweet Christmas stocking. It can be made with or without quilting and has optional skirts with 3 different styles to choose from: gathered, pleated or beaded smocking. I'll link the pattern in the description, and you can even add some personalised embroidery. I'll link the pattern for this mistletoe monogram below too. We start by printing the pattern. I have a full tutorial on this, so if it's your first time, you'll find it in the description. Fold your fabric in half on the grain line and pin your paper pattern pieces on the fabric, lining up the grain line parallel to the selvage edge. Now you can cut around them. If you're quilting, also cut your wadding, and I recommend cutting fabric and wadding a little bigger than the pattern pieces to allow for quilting shrinkage. Temporarily pin together each outer fabric piece to each wadding piece while you baste them in place. Make sure the wrong side of the outer fabric is facing the wadding. You can do this with safety pins or by hand stitching some basting stitches. I highly recommend a walking foot and a machine quilting needle. A quilting guide attachment is helpful, but you can also mark your lines with a marking tool and ruler. You can choose any quilting style you like. Vertical lines are a great simple option. I like to distance the quilting lines 2 centimeters apart and set my stitch length to 4. Quilt each piece of outer fabric to a wadding piece. When your quilting is complete, place your paper pattern piece back onto the quilted fabric and cut around it. Whether you're quilting or not, we can now make the outer stocking. With right sides facing, pin together the 2 pieces of outer fabric. With a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance, stitch around the stocking, leaving the top open. Press the seam open. It's a little awkward, but a tailor's ham or even something stuffed in will help. We need to clip all the curves so it sits nicely when turned out. You can either clip into the seam allowance every centimetre or so at the curves, or you can cut back the whole seam allowance to just a few millimetres. If you choose to clip, you can also grade this seam to reduce bulk, and if you quilted, also trim back any excess wadding. To make your lip, align the longest ends together by folding the fabric in half so wrong sides are facing, and press. Open it up again and fold each long outer edge into this centre line you created, tucking it in on itself, and press again. Edge stitch the open long side. It can be a little fiddly, but after the first few stitches you can gently hold the long tails at the back. Repeat the stocking construction for your lining fabric, but remember to leave a gap between the notches. Keep one of the stockings with right sides facing. Turn the other so wrong sides are facing. Place the stocking that you turned inside the other. You'll see that the right sides of each layer are now facing. Align the top edges and add the loop in between. Position it on the outer edge, the same side as the heel, with the raw end in line with the top edges of the outer and lining. Pin around this top edge. Sew along the top edge with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Pull the full stocking open and press the middle seam. You can again grade this seam or remove any excess wadding to reduce bulk. Find the gap in the side of the lining and pull the stocking through. Now push the lining inside the outer and check everything fits nicely. Bring the lining out again and stitch along the edge of the gap we left at the side. Push the lining inside again and press the top edge, ensuring no lining is peeking over. Pin to stop any shifting and stitch along the top edge 0.5 centimeters from the top. This helps the lining stay in place. You can now add a skirt to your stocking if you like. Depending on which skirt option you're making this time, you will have cut your skirt fabric a slightly different width as marked on the pattern piece. All the skirts start by making a sealed band. Take your skirt piece and align the shortest ends together by folding the fabric in half so right sides are facing. Stitch along the open end with a 1 cm seam allowance. Press open the new seam and position it centrally at the back of the band. Now fold in the bottom edge and top edge of the top fabric layer into the middle, making thirds. You'll see the back layer of fabric is now exposed. Align the top and bottom edges of this back layer together, folding it in half and concealing the other layers inside. Align the seams and pin in place. With a 1 cm seam allowance, stitch along this aligned edge, making sure the inner fabric layers stay tucked inside. Sew just what you can. We will move it along to get the rest next. When you've sewn it as far as you can, begin to pull out the inner fabric towards you from inside the tube, which will add length to your edge. Keep aligning the new revealed edge and sew until you have nearly reached your starting point. Leave a gap of about 5 cm. Using the gap, pull through the fabric to reveal your created band. Position the horizontal seam on the inside of the band and a little above the bottom edge. Give it a press and edge stitch along the gap we left to seal it closed. To make the gathered skirt, we're going to stitch along the top edge. Make sure the horizontal seam is hidden inside the band and at the bottom. Pin in place and start at the vertical seam. Using your widest stitch length, sew along the top of the band 2 cm in from the edge, the whole way around the circumference. Don't backstitch at the beginning or end and leave long thread tails. Sew a line parallel to the first, this time 3 cm from the top edge. Gently pull the long bobbin thread tails, the ones underneath, to make the fabric gather. Gather it in until it measures 44 cm in circumference. You can put it over the stocking to finalise the perfect width. Remember to put that horizontal seam inside the band. Tie knots in the thread when you're happy with the width. Now fix the gathers so they are spread evenly. Place the skirt on the stocking and align the vertical seams. Line up your first parallel stitch line to the row of edge stitching we made at the top of the stocking. Reset your normal stitch length and sew the pieces together 2.5 cm from the top edge of the skirt. That's in between your 2 parallel lines. For the pleated skirt, we're going to mark our pleat lines on the top edge of the skirt band the whole way around the circumference. Align the vertical seam on your skirt with a seam line marked on the pattern piece and mark the pleat guidelines. To create the pleats, align the 2 sides of the first pleat by putting the start line on top of the end line. You'll notice this folds the middle of the pleat underneath and pin it in place. Repeat this for all the pleats and check your skirt fits onto the stocking. To help the fabric sit in place, I press the pleats at this stage. You can press just at the top where you've pinned, or for a more crisp look you can press the folds all the way to the bottom of the band. Using your longest stitch length, temporarily sew the skirt band 1.5 cm from the top edge of the skirt. Place the skirt onto the stocking and align the vertical seams. Line up the temporary stitch line on the skirt to the top of the stocking. Reset your normal stitch length and sew the pieces together 2.5 cm from the top edge of the skirt. You can now remove the first temporary line of stitching. For the smocked skirt, we're going to mark grid lines around most of the circumference for pleating. With the vertical seam of the skirt on the left, mark a line of dots parallel to the top edge 4.5 cm down, marking every centimetre horizontally to the right, including one at the vertical seam line. Now mark another horizontal line of dots 1 cm down from the first. Continue marking with 3 rows in total. This grid will go round most of the circumference, except the last part is marked in the pattern. Cut threads in approximately 90 centimetre lengths. I like to use double thread in each row. Thread your needle and tie a double knot, even triple to be safe, at the end. For the first and third row we will follow this pattern. Come up from underneath the fabric at the vertical seam dot. Now pinch the next horizontal dot in the row with your needle, going under just before it and up just after it. You can do this in one movement. Add a bead to your needle and pinch the next dot. Alternate with beads to the marker point. Row 1 and 3 have a rhythm of pinch, bead, pinch. On the middle row, come up at the vertical seam dot and add a bead. This row has a rhythm of bead, pinch, pinch. When you've completed all 3 rows to the marker, we're going to create the pleats. Holding the loose threads in one hand, gently slide the fabric the opposite direction with the other. Work delicately as we don't want any of those threads to pop. Fix the pleats across the whole skirt and notice the pleated section of the band now measures the same as the non-pleated section. When you're happy with the pleating, we're going to fix the thread tails. Taking one row at a time, rethread the tails and bring the needle down under the fabric about a centimetre from your last dot. Repeat for each row. Now you can tie a knot in each row's thread tail that we have hidden inside the band. I like to double, maybe even triple those knots here, as this is securing all our work in place. Place the skirt onto the stocking and decide which way round you'd like it to go, because remember the back of the skirt will be plain. Line up the skirt about 1 or 2 centimetres higher than the stocking and pin in place. We will hand stitch this. Prepare your needle and thread, making a double knot at the end of a double length of thread. Pull the band back a little to reveal the stocking. Make a tack stitch by pinching the outside of the stocking and repeat a few times to secure the thread. Then pinch a little of the inside of the band fabric and again back to the outside of the stocking. Repeat a few times to strengthen the stitch, and repeat a few times around the band. I hope you enjoy making this little collection of stockings, and it gives you an introduction to lots of different fabric manipulation techniques.